All right, welcome back. We've just gone over the rules for this thing, the usual rules. So we're going to get some problems with blanks in critical reasoning. So let's once again, here's the copyright notice. These problems are all from the free GMAT prep software, copyright GMAC. And of course, when you see multiple choice questions, that's where you put the answer. Okay, let's put one of these things on the board. How about, let's say, that one. Don't forget multiple choice answers. That's where you put them. Give it a shot. Okay, should probably get some sort of answer to this thing in the next 20, 30 seconds. Remember, this is a test where you can't not answer the questions. You have to pick something, even if it's a guess, or the test will not let you move on. So let's pick something in the next 10, 20 seconds. Okay, again, if you don't have an answer to this thing, you should pick one pretty soon. As a group, you guys are doing pretty well on it. So, well, what I'm really interested in seeing is the answers that you guys pick now towards the end of the period. In any case, let's take a look. So you have this blank here. When you have critical reasoning problems with blanks in them, it's a little bit different from what you're normally used to in the sense that you don't have a question type right in front of your face, which can be a bad thing, but can also be a good thing. I mean, the negative there is that you might have some established protocols that you have in your head when you see a certain question type. The good part, though, is that you can just think about the passage without being encumbered by some sort of template that you feel like you have to stick to. You know, because basically the deal is if you can understand exactly what the blank is asking you to do, then there's no reason to even try to shoehorn it into any sort of box or question type or whatever. So, like, again, when you see a blank in a critical reasoning question, the first thing you should try to do is just read through the argument and see what the blank requires. Like what kind of thing, whether it's another fact or an explanation or a prediction or who knows what it is. The more specific you can be, the better. And if you can come up with specific criteria, then you're good. Just take those criteria straight to the answer choices. In other words, don't detour with any sort of trying to classify it into a question type. But if you can, if you don't understand the passage well enough to come up with something specific, you can come up with specifics. Then as a backup, try to figure out the question type and go from there. But only as a backup. So clearly to this thing and see what we need. So, all right, and again, you can always approach this with the angle of explaining it to a 10-year-old, simplify the language. Either think of explaining it to a kid who's about 10 years old, or think of explaining it to someone whose English is just not that great. Like we just don't know too many words in English, either way. So this passage, basically when you have high interest rates, insurance companies lower the price of insurance because they want to make more money. So this, as we read this should strike to you as something that is a bit weird because they're lowering the price of insurance. And they're saying the reason for doing that, it doesn't even say despite or anything like that. It says the reason why they're actually doing that is they want to bring in as much revenue as possible. So in other words, they're lowering the price of buying insurance so that they can make more total revenue. Right away, when you get there, you should already be thinking about, these things seem to contradict each other, they seem to clash in some sort of way. So it should already be kind of wheels turning in your head in that direction. But then, okay, so they can do that, blah, 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 and the premium reductions actually help achieve this. So what are we looking for here? Be as specific as you can. Again, you have this action, and you have this goal. And then the passage actually goes on to say that, yes, indeed, this action really does help achieve this goal. What are we looking for in blank? While you guys are typing, I'm going to just type the summary that we have up there down here. So they're lowering the prices. Okay, at least one of you guys is typing. What kind of requirements can you impose on that blank? There's the blank in a simpler form of the passage. Shy crowd. Okay. We still have one person typing. Basically the deal is this. Yeah, right? Like it's going to be something like what Hanke is putting there, right? Because you have a lower unit price. Like if you sell an insurance policy, they're actually taking in less money per policy than they were before. So this is actually kind of like a math problem almost. Exactly. Revenue is P times Q, and the P is going down, but the P times Q is still going up. So in other words, the cost times number of policies is increasing. So there's only one way around it, which is that this number, because the cost is going down, so this thing has to be going up. And even before you get to the blank, if you're actively reading this, you should be like, well, it's a little bit weird. When I think of prices going down, I think of money going down. So you should already be thinking about this just as you get halfway through that passage. But this must go up. Otherwise, it isn't going to work. So if you look at the choices, let's see what we have. Interest rates are likely to decrease. We don't care because we're talking about what happens when they are high. So it doesn't matter what they do when they decrease. Small insurance companies, there's no distinction between smaller and larger here. If this was relevant, we would have to have something in here about small companies do this, big companies do that. Aha, this one. If they lower the price, more people will buy. Make an analogy if you have to. It's kind of like you have a store, and if you slash prices on your items, then more people will buy them, and you'll make more money. This an increase in the number of policies eventually leads to more claims that they have to pay. Claims they have to pay is not in consideration here. They just talk about taking in money. All they want to do is take in more money, regardless of how much claims they have to pay out. This passage doesn't deal with total intake minus payout for claims. It just deals with taking in as much as possible, and that's it. Remember, if the words don't say it, the words don't say it. Basically, yeah. And then E, more about claims. We're not talking about paying out claims. We're just talking about intake and cost of premium, and that is end of story. So you guys, the group, you guys did pretty well on this problem. If you have any questions about it, feel free. If not, I'm going to scroll over to another problem pretty soon. In order to answer this question, what does one need to know? And no, you don't. You just have to understand some really basic math. I mean, because the words in the passage say that the only thing you have to understand is that cost times how many policies you sell is your total intake. That's it. Plenty to understand. Because they tell you that this number goes down, and they also tell you that this product goes up. So just purely mathematically, there's only one way those things can both be true, and that would be if this goes up by enough to cancel this out and more. So no, you don't know anything about economic trends or relationships or whatever. And even if this stuff contravened regular economics, still wouldn't matter. I mean, you have to go with what the words say. They're not going to do that. They're not going to create a problem that contradicts classical economics. But if they did, then you'd have to go with whatever the words say, and not with what the words don't say, pretty much. Hope that helps. Let's try another one. About, yeah, no worries there. Okay, cool. Try this. Remember that answers to multiple choice questions belong there in the polling area. If you just logged in and we're in the middle, it's a problem. So, yep. Okay, we should pick something to this pretty soon here. There are people having chosen each choice here, so if you have to guess, then there's probably a lot of other people guessing right along with you. So if you, Haley, Kim, Melissa, remember this is a test where you can't not answer the questions. So gotta answer the questions. All right, so we are totally all over the place here. So let's take a look at this. Here's your distribution of answers. I don't normally show these, but it's kind of interesting because we have two answers more popular than the others. We have B, boy, and D, dog here that both have a lot of proponents. Let's take a look. So in this case, if you glance over this, you can actually kind of tell this is going to be some problem where you're looking for additional evidence for something, strengthen an argument, whatever. But we discussed, so if you notice that, then you'll know this is going to have to be, I mean, like other strengthening problems, you're going to have to find some sort of new information or outside fact that serves as additional evidence. So, but then we got to figure out evidence for what. Again, let's explain this to somebody with really simple English or a 10-year-old or something like that. And again, when you have sentences like this one, you definitely want to break that up into more than one sentence because nobody would ever deliver a sentence like this as a single thought. So you shouldn't leave it that way. You should rephrase it, at least in your head, and maybe in some sort of abbreviated form on the paper. So, not really watching the minutes and seconds. You shouldn't really either. I mean, if you're watching minutes and seconds on individual problems, that's not a great habit. I mean, time management should, I'm responding to the question in the chat box. Time management is really just, am I honestly getting somewhere? You know, if you're looking at the text, am I looking for something and not just looking at things? As long as you quit when you're not making progress, that's all the time management really is. So, okay, So let's make this 2 sentences. So the first sentence is a fact. On the whole, scientists do this. This is not any sort of guess or hypothesis. This is stated as a fact about what they do. So fact, scientists do their most creative work. Scientists are more creative before they are 40. So when they start out, where do you think this would go if this was a conversation? Like, let's say that somebody mentioned that at the dinner table. I mean, if that discussion goes somewhere, we're going to be like, what? Why? That's such a weird fact. I want to know why that's true. Because again, when you see these things, I mean, the topics are not going to be the kinds of things that you would talk about every day necessarily, but they are. The arguments proceed a lot of the time the same way they would around dinner table. So when you see this, you're thinking, I wonder why. So that should be the thought that already occurs in your head is, I wonder why. Okay. Now let's see what they say. So a tendency that has been taken to show. So some people think that you just get too old to be creative. All right, now where do we go when we mention, like, other people think this, or it has been believed, lots of people think, experts have said? Like, where are we pretty much always going to go with that? Either in a conversation or in one of these critical reasoning problems. If I toss out, like, other people think this, where am I going with that? But, yeah, right, anything. I mean, just think about someone saying, lots of people think fruit is good for you. That person is definitely going to tell you some way that fruit is bad. This is how we roll as humans, right? So, some people think that creativity basically just declines as you age. So, people get less creative, older, just goes with less creative. So, and I guess are more creative is not the way I should have put this. I just do more creative stuff. Okay. Some people think this. An alternative explanation, other people think that by the time they get to that age, most of them have worked in their field for a really long time, and so they've basically just been doing it for too long, is this other hypothesis. So others think most older scientists have just been doing the same thing for too long. Okay, and then we want to argue this. We want to take the green side of this argument. And as I mentioned in a bunch of other study halls, the more that you can personalize these things, like the more that you can pretend that you are involved in them personally, the better. Like, if you were someone who was about to turn 40, and these purple people were saying, hey man, by the time you hit 40, your creativity is gone, buddy. I mean, if someone says that to you, you're going to definitely be pretty emotionally invested in arguing against it, right? So it might make it easier to think about this whole thing. So this is you think the thing that is green. Okay. And you want more evidence. You want something that if you read it, it's going to make you nod your head and be like, yep, I'm right, you're wrong, haha. So let's take a look. So the idea is you want a piece of evidence that definitely serves to favor your argument, but it should also mostly run against this one. Because if you find evidence that's consistent with both arguments, that doesn't really help, because it doesn't really show anything. You know, it doesn't favor one side or the other. So you want evidence that is in your favor, works for your argument, and also works against the other guy's argument. In other words, what you can think is, if your hypothesis is true, then whatever this piece of evidence is should be expected. Should be something expected or unsurprising if your hypothesis is true. On the other hand, it should be something that doesn't really work, or can't really happen if old equals less creative is a thing. Okay, so let's take a look. Choice A says the average age of recipients of research grants is greater than 40. Well, there's a big hole here. Like, we don't really have any connection between this and what else. Like, what would this have to be connected to for this to be relevant here at all? Think about the issue that you're arguing passionately about. Yeah, this has nothing to do with creativity. At least we don't know, right? You can't just randomly assume that a research grant has to do with being creative. So there's no real connection here unless you just make one up, which is not really good form. Okay, B. What does B say if you're a 10-year-old? Can anybody put B into simpler terms? Let's see, maybe you guys can rephrase choice B. Aha, so that is the basic idea, TK, although it lacks a little bit of specificity. But, and I'd be careful with the because there. But what we want to focus on here is the idea of disproportionately large. Like, that means, as opposed to being proportionately large. So, this means that if you look, disproportionate is not a super extreme word. It just means greater than some other fraction, but it's not an extreme. Plus, remember that extremes are not really a negative in problems like this one. I mean, because remember that this is not, if you were looking for an assumption behind an argument, then you would be wary of things that sound too extreme. But in problems like this one, actually, the more extreme the statement is, the more likely it is to serve as evidence on one side or another. Remember, this is not a must-be-true type of thing. This is just, if I give you this random outside fact, does it help or hurt? So extreme would not even be a bad thing here. And moreover, this is not really extreme in the first place. So, okay, let's break this down. If you look at people what's the significance of these people? Why do we care about them? Why are those people significant? The people who do creative work over 40. They're pretty significant here. Why? What do they represent? as far as this trend is concerned. Yeah, these are the people who don't fit the trend, and of course that's going to be something important, right? I mean, if you think about any other trend, like, hey, when most people go into this area, they get this really bad tropical disease, but these 3 people didn't get it. I mean, you're going to totally look at those 3 people and see what makes them different from everybody else, right? So it definitely matters. So these guys are the rule breakers. If you look at the guys who break the trend, disproportionately means a greater percentage than overall. Like, for example, if people who pursue engineering are disproportionately men, that means that the percent of men in engineering is higher than the percent of men overall. It just means greater percent or greater fraction than the entire population is what disproportionate means. So this means if you look, B says, among the exceptions to the rule, the scientists who are still doing creative work after 40, a greater percent are relatively new to the field than in the overall population of scientists. So let's think about that. Does that work for my argument? Well, absolutely it does. Right? My argument is this. My argument is the people who are not doing creative work are doing it because they've been in the field for too long. In other words, this is exactly what I should expect if my hypothesis is true. I would expect that the less time you spend in the field, the more likely you would be to do creative work. So this is exactly what I would expect. But it's also got to work against the other guys. The other guys just think that randomly older people are just less creative. So if the other guys were right, then if you looked at these people, what would be true about the percentages? Would just be disproportionate? If they were right. Remember, if these guys are right, then the time you spent in the field is irrelevant. Because these guys just think it's your age, biological, as you get older. These guys don't care how long you've been in the field. So if these guys are right, then just like any other irrelevant factor, you would expect this to be exactly proportional. You would expect it to be the same. Like, if you want to stick percentages on it, you can, right? Let's say that, let's say that of all scientists, only like 10% entered the field as older scientists. This would be saying like 20 or 30 or 40% of the creative ones did. If these guys were right, then if 10% of all the scientists were older when they started, then 10% of these guys would also be. Because if this were disproportionate, it would suggest some sort of relationship, which these guys disclaimed. So this is the answer choice we want, because this is something that is very much consistent with what I'm trying to argue, and is totally inconsistent with what they say. If you take a look at the rest of this, choice C says that basically people tell themselves that they are getting less creative as they get older. And so they get like less ambitious or whatever. The problem is that this doesn't help explain anything. I mean, because even if it doesn't matter which of these explanations you use, because this is saying scientists kind of bring it on themselves. So C, in choice C, the actual reason for this is pretty much irrelevant.
You know, it might not even be real at all, but they're telling themselves it's real. It's definitely not going to help you distinguish why. This says the scientists who are older than 40 tend to be more satisfied by doing things like teaching and mentoring. So this might explain it if it was something like they don't do as much research, or they don't put their heart into it quite as much. But notice that this would go against both of our arguments. I mean, if they were less creative because they just didn't care about their research as much, then that's another reason. That's a third reason that's not the same as mine or the other guys. I mean, this has nothing to do with being new to the field, and it also has nothing to do with their physical age. So, not what we want. And then E is not a choice that very many of you picked. But E just says that you witness the same pattern in other fields, which is great, but then in those other fields you would have exactly the same dilemma of, I don't know why. And these would both be plausible hypotheses. I mean, you could make exactly the same argument in poetry and music. Still have the same argument raging on and on. So we want to support the explanation that the speaker gives. So when you say a tendency that has been taken to do this, that is specifically the speaker does not take that side. This is what other people think. So you just pay attention to which statements are being made by the speaker. So an alternative explanation is this. So I mean, it's a very formal sounding piece of language, but if I'm like, hey, these other guys think blah, 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 but actually another reason is X, then, you know, I'm supporting reason X. So, yeah, let's see, the first explanation. Well, the first explanation is not really so much irrelevant because if you're trying to settle an issue, then you actually have to have evidence that doesn't favor both of those hypotheses. So, because this isn't just one explanation per se, it's actually like supporting one explanation in a debate. So if you had evidence that was perfectly consistent with both, then you couldn't really say that it supports one. I mean, they're not going to write a trick question, so if they don't specify, then then there's only going to be one explanation that even supports it in the first place, like there is here. But in a debate between two positions, anything that supports one should also work against the other one. Cool, it's a good problem. And again, the density of the language here is kind of a problem. But that's where you need to spend the time. I mean, you shouldn't rush through wordings like this. You need to spend some time processing it and spend some time on it. Definitely worth it. Let's look for another one. What about that? This one's not as dense as the previous one, which means it probably won't take you as long. Remember, here's where you find answers to multiple choice questions. I should be picking something pretty soon. Okay, if you have to guess, go ahead and guess. Most people are picking the same choice here. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so if you peek down at the question line first, you can notice these keywords. So what's going on here, again, you're giving a reason why something is probably going to happen. This is another like strengthening evidence thing. So it's going to be an outside fact, again, and it's going to serve as additional evidence for some point. So there you go. You might want to scout that out just because you want goals. Right? Like when you read this stuff, you don't want to just read it aimlessly with no real point. You want to actually be looking for something in there. So here we're looking for something where we need more evidence, right? We're looking for some sort of deficiency in this argument, or something where it needs explanation or needs to be backed up. So okay, if you give people carts, then more people will go there. So if you have carts, then you're going to have more shoppers. But then, if the amount only just covered the cost of providing the carts, the point here is that this amount will not do what? These shoppers, they will increase their revenue, but only to a point where it covers exactly the additional cost. So revenue minus cost will not increase, right? So these shoppers will not increase the stores, but they won't decrease them either. They won't increase or decrease the store's profits. Well, yes, it is. Okay, but then they're saying profits overall will go up. And you want an additional reason for this. So let's forget the choices for a second. If we lay it out in these simple terms, you can pretty much see what we're going to need here. I mean, what they're saying is if you add carts here, then there's going to be more shoppers, but we know that more shoppers are not going to be the source of extra profits. So yeah, it's just a process of elimination, right? It's what Ed and L says. There's only one other group of people who could possibly give us more profits. So it's got to be them, right? I mean, if you want to just think about it in super, super simplistic terms, where will the extra profits come from? Well, it's either going to be the new customers or the existing customers, but they have specifically said that it's not going to be the new customers. So it has to be some sort of reason that's going to make us think that existing customers will give more profits. So nothing else could possibly support this. So we need a reason why existing customers will increase the profits. So it's got to have something to do with, like, compared to the way they shopped before. So A just says that you could actually feasibly do it. So that has nothing to do with profits. You know, like it's not, the aisles are not so narrow that they would block the cart. We don't care. This says other stores are doing it, but that's not relevant. Because what you don't need to worry about is whether those stores would like pitch off the extra customer base, because the words do say that more shoppers would go there. So that would be taking all this into account. You know, because remember that these things are not going to be lies. The things that are stated in the past, those are things. So even if B is true, the expert's prediction is still the expert's prediction. This says that some people wouldn't go there. Like Descartes will not appeal to every single person in the world. That's fine. We don't have to appeal to every single person in the world. Because again, we're going to get more people. That's the thing. We're not going to get everybody. D says that you have to incur other additional costs. D is going to be covered under this, though. Like D is going to be part of the cost of providing the cards. So this has basically already been considered. Or if it hasn't been considered, then this will go against you. I mean, this would be bad. So either it's already in there or it is bad. Half of C. Maybe you can tell me which half of C. And then E says that if you took one of these existing customers and you give that person a card, they'll probably buy more stuff. So this is the only choice that supports what we need to support. Yeah, don't just read half the choices. Make sure you read all of the choices, all the words. All right, let's grab another one of these problems. How about let's say this one's got a lot of words in it. Some people just don't like problems with lots of words in them. So if you are one of those people, this problem is for you. Lots of words. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there are lots of words in this problem, but you should be picking something soon. Okay, let's look at what's going on here. So if you peek at the question line, it's not as, I mean, the words are not as obviously, there's not much of an obvious giveaway of the type of task, but you have some fact considerations which may help settle some issue. We'll have to read the whole passage to see what all this blah, 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 blah about elephants and stuff is. But we need a reason. So we're saying, in other words, some evidence will help us settle some issue. So we're going to need to have some connection between those specific facts and that issue. So let's take a look. So what do the facts say? Well, when there is hunting, I mean reproductive maturity, let's call that puberty. So when you hunt an animal, you're going to see it hitting puberty earlier for whatever reason. The because isn't really going to matter because the because is not going to have to do with using the evidence to evaluate stuff. So they say hunting goes hand in hand with early puberty. Then what they say is lack of food, so like famine. Famine goes with later puberty. For whatever reason, they're not as kind with providing explanations as they were with the early stuff. But basically that's what it is. Hunting goes with early puberty, famine goes with later puberty. These are the considerations. And then what that last sentence says is, knowing these things will help us decide which of those two, like hunting and famine, killed off the mastodons. Okay, so now what you don't want to do is just pick some other random thing that would help us tell. So, like, I'm looking specifically at choice E. Like, choice E is a totally different, unrelated thing that might help us tell. Yeah, because if the dwellings made of these things were earlier than hunting, then hunting probably didn't kill them. But that has nothing to do with the science they presented earlier. Like, no, the question doesn't just say, give me anything that would help settle this issue. It doesn't say that. The question says we need a reason why these facts. So you gotta have something to do with puberty. Like, E doesn't have anything to do with early versus late puberty, so E is not a thing. That was the most popular wrong answer here. But I'm sure you read the question carefully, guys. The other ones, A has nothing to do with the same. A has nothing to do with the same stuff. Nobody picked A. But again, early versus late puberty. Nope, they don't talk about it. B says the age when they hit puberty can be established. Okay, we don't care how you establish it. This is definitely the right answer. Because it means that we can use these considerations to decide. If they hit it early, hey, hunting. If they hit it late, hey, hunting. This is just when they became extinct, but not how. Again, it has nothing to do with the early or late puberty criterion. And then this one does mention reaching puberty, but this is male versus female, which is not a criterion the passage mentions. They don't go into that. They just look at the whole population and say that if everybody is hitting puberty earlier, then blah, 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 blah. So again, notice your work is 90% of the work that you do happens up here. You know, like you don't really want to go into the choices until you have a very, very specific criterion to apply to them. Like you should have a question that you can ask each of the choices. Like, hey, do you connect the idea of puberty to these mastodons? Yes or no? All right, only one choice does. But just make sure you don't go into the choices and randomly read them. Like make sure you go in there with some sort of standard by which you're going to evaluate them, some sort of specific. Any questions about this one? Not. See, look at another one. About it. And what is the answer? The answer is B, boy. Okay. Hello. That one. And here's where your multiple choice answers go. Okay, it should be answering this thing pretty soon, guys. As far as the time question up there, it's just until most people have answered it. Because again, remember, you shouldn't be like looking at minutes and seconds every time you're doing a problem. That's actually a terrible habit. If you're going to look at a timer, you should only look at a timer 1, 2, 3 times in an entire section. The rest of that should be just normal time management, which is if you're stuck, stop. Pretty much all time management is. Okay, let's take a look at this thing. So, if you skip down to the question line to get a sense of something, we have, okay, nevertheless, something is true because. So again, this is going to be like a lot of those other ones. You're going to have something unexpected given the other facts, given previously stated stuff. That's what the nevertheless is telling you. And then you want to come up with it. You want to explain the unexpected thing. With new information, of course. Because, I mean, if it was not new information, then you wouldn't have to apply it. Okay, let's take a look. So, researchers, people have found some drugs in lakes and rivers. If they were there in large quantities, then they could be harmful. But they're not. There's too little of these drugs to actually affect people. So there's a lot of words there, but basically that just says people in rivers and lakes, there are some drugs, but not enough to affect people directly. All right, this is a thing. This is a fact. It is not a lie. So, like, you can't pick something that implies that they will affect people because they don't. So there's not enough of them. So they're thinking about taking these out. So you know that the effect of the drug itself is not going to play a role here because there is no effect. So, but according to these experts, taking the drugs out of the lakes and rivers, public health benefits, that means benefits for people. Not the public is people. It's not like animals, the environment, or anything. So, it'll still help people. So that's what we need. We need some way in which, and I mean what that really means is that the drugs, if they're still there, have to be harming people in some way. Because if you take them away, then it's going to, if the absence of the drugs is a positive, then we need a negative. So we need a way in which the drugs affect people negatively, but it cannot be the actual pharmacological action of the drugs themselves, because they don't have it. There's not enough of the drug there to actually affect people. This is what we need. So the drugs have to be harming people in some other way. That's a standard. We can take that to the choices. All right, let's see what happens if we do that. So the A says that some of these will still not harm people even if you megadose them. Well, that's great. That's the opposite of what we want. We actually want a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And it's pharmacological effect. B says that some of these drugs actually counteract other harmful effects. This is not good. I mean, this means that this is the opposite of what we want. Because this means that there's a benefit in leaving those things there. Because they don't affect people. They said that. Directly they don't. And they might even be an antidote against other stuff. This is the exact opposite of what we want. I mean, this would actually be a very good, this is a benefit of leaving those drugs there. Not great. So, yeah, counteract. C says that if people have side effects when they're treated, then they have their treatment changed. So treatment is right off the bat not relevant. But also, again, side effects when being treated is irrelevant because these drugs are not present in enough of a concentration to do that. So double irrelevant because it's not nothing to have these effects, and we don't really care what their doctors do. Negative effects are negative effects. D says that most of them break down into other harmless things. This is kind of like A. This is like saying that everything is harmless all the time. We want a negative. This is not a negative. And then there is E, elephant. This says that if you leave the drugs in there, then they could make bacteria resistant. This is a negative for humans, because then those drugs, which would normally kill these bacteria, well, they become resistant. So this is bad for humans. And it's bad as required in an indirect way, because it's bad through making bacteria less likely to be killed by a drug. So that's the answer we want. Again, notice once you have a standard to apply to the choices, you'll see the four wrong answers every time should be like totally wrong. 5 colors and 4 sizes is wrong. I mean, if you have to explain something like this, then the wrong answers will either be totally irrelevant or will actually go the wrong way. Difficulty level is irrelevant. In fact, the fact that you have to ask that question is proof that there is no sense in even thinking about it. Cannot help you in any way. It's just a distraction. Mental clutter. So, yeah, don't ever think about difficulty levels, guys. It's just crap in your head. You want to think about the problem and how to solve it, and that should be your whole universe. All right, let's look at one more. I mean, more generally, when it comes to stuff like that, if there's something that you can't control, then don't think about it. And if there's something that you can't detect, then don't think about it. I mean, a lot of people like to complicate their world for no apparent reason, but it's not a good idea. So I mean, any sort of distraction will really compromise your ability to solve these things. And, I mean, think about, you drive your car and you're looking for some address by the side of the road. And people do things like turn down music because even that will distract them from a task as simple as finding something by the side of the road. So really, anything, any side thoughts at all will just destroy your ability to concentrate on these problems. So if you even let thoughts like that intrude on your thought process. So it's worse than just irrelevant. It'll actually compromise your ability to solve the problem if you're thinking about it. Okay, let's try one more. Give it a shot. Yeah, basically you just have a problem and you want to solve it. There you go. If you got a problem, I'll solve it. Someone will be old enough to understand it. Okay, try this. Here's where you find answer choices. Someone got it. Someone who's old like me. All right, give it a shot. Alright, we should pick a thing pretty soon, guys. Remember, you have to be very vigilant about checking yourself. I mean, if you are looking at words, this is bad. If you are looking for things, this is good. What you need to do is just import your instinct from things like building furniture. Like if you're putting a bookcase together, you either know where the next piece goes or you don't know where the next piece goes. There's no in between. If you think you kind of sort of know where the next piece goes, then you don't know where the next piece goes. So think about it like that. Like unless you are looking at something for a very particular reason and looking for something in the words, don't keep looking at the words. I mean, step back, regroup, what am I looking for? I need a standard. You need to define something I should look for, do it, then go back and look for it. Okay, so this was again the same kind of task as we've been seeing. However, blah, 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 blah sense. So again, we have something that is going to be seemingly a contradiction, and then we're going to want to explain. So something unexpected
and we're going to have to explain it with outside facts and new info. Okay. So let's see what's going on here. Well, the government restricts the export. So this was a lot of dense words here, but basically in this country, let's make it the U.S. or whatever country you're in your country, it's hard to ship cashews out of the country in raw form. So like farmers can't just send their crops abroad because of laws. So they're keeping the cost low for domestic plants in the country. So basically farmers, because the law says farmers can't just sell raw cashews abroad, they route them to processing plants in the country, within the country, their country. Okay. So this policy, I mean, obviously anything that reduces their market is going to be bad for them. So this policy is bad for farmers. But the plants are in the cities. So, I mean, this is clearly bad for farmers. But it's good, that's what's say farmers, I'll fix that in a second. But it's good for city workers because the processing plants are in the cities. Farmers, farmers. Okay. So you would think that it would reduce unemployment in the city and maybe raise it out in the rural areas where these farmers live. So the government says that the restrictions help reduce the unemployment of these people. In other words, removing them would hurt their effort. So the government says it'll keep people employed in the city. But even though these things are true, even though these are things, they say, you want to say, nope. Even though these things are true, they may have the restrictions actually make urban unemployment go up. The restrictions actually increase unemployment in the cities. Okay, so this is really kind of perplexing, and the thing that is good about that is the more perplexing the result is, the more you're going to be able to narrow down what you require of a right answer. Because, like, in point of fact, the policy is definitely bad for farmers. That's definitely a thing. And also, it keeps the workers employed at the plants. But we still, this is again, this is shades of another problem, right? It's kind of like that problem with the shopping carts. It's like, well, the new customers won't bring in more profits, so who will? Same thing, like these people are not unemployed, the people who work at the plants, because the policy keeps them employed. So these guys, these people, do not contribute to the unemployment. So what we need to find is we need to find some other population of people in the cities who are unemployed because of this policy. That's pretty specific. Like that is just so specific. I mean, again, you should take the time to get that. It's a very specific standard. We need another group of people who are in the city who are unemployed because of the restriction.
So that's very specific. Again, like I said before, like pretty much 90% of your work is done by the time you even touch the answer choices. That. We need another group of unemployed to build the city well. Because they can't make profits, the farmers are being driven into the cities, and because they are farmers, when they get into the city, they don't have a job. So there's the answer we want. I mean, because the policy is the reason why they are not making profits as farmers. So the policy is actually driving them into the cities where they are unemployed in the street. That's the choice we want. Again, it's clear winner. I mean, if you have a standard like this and you have that, you don't even need to read the rest of the choices if it's that good. But if you take a look at them, this says that, you know, some of the other parts of the nut are used by other industries. That's great, but that doesn't really have to do with these farmers. In fact, this seems like it'll just create more jobs in the cities. So this is backward. I mean, we want more unemployment in the cities. This is like, actually, we keep even more people employed. Well, yeah, this is the opposite of what we want. We don't care about other crops because, yeah, we don't care about other crops. This one, comparing income versus not income, nope, we just want to compare jobs versus not jobs. Not how much money they make. And then this, if you did not have the government propping them up, then the processing plants would not be able to compete. Well, guess what? The government is propping them up, so we don't care. This is contrary to reality. So we can hypothesize all the unicorns we want, but it doesn't make them relevant. There we go. Again, you want to have a standard, you want to have something specific to which you could subject the choices. This definitely does the job. Good times. And that's it. So I do think the next one of these Thursdays thingies is in 2 weeks. So the times are going to shuttle around a little bit. I think most of them are going to be at around this time now. But just check the Thursdays with Ron page. The new session should be posted up here pretty soon. It's going to be, I think, the 29th, but just check it in a couple of days just to make sure. And awesome. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, good luck. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.